I'll try to get the exams by, say, Saturday at the minimum, maybe Friday. We'll see. It's a small class, so we'll see. I haven't had a chance to really look at anything yet, just because it's. I would have graded some yesterday, but we had the Costa Rica throat meeting. All right, so I want to show you one last video from the Institute for Highway Safety. I do encourage you to go out there on YouTube. They got plenty of videos. Some of them are really, really quite interesting. They do a lot of the crash tests. There was a famous commercial not too long ago, probably before your, well, maybe it was a long time, where they had these test drive dummies, and they would these commercials, and they would talk in the commercial. It was pretty hilarious commercials. And so they're a big part of that, is making cars safer. So this is an interesting video. This will give you one. This is good. It's kind of a short one too. So. So they're going to test these two cars and which one's safer. So that's one out of the, I don't know, I can't remember what year, is 59. Bel Air versus a Chevrolet Malibu 2009. So what you want to look at, you want to look at his head. All right, obviously no airbags. You want to look at not just how it hits, but how his neck and everything else moves around. You want to look at his feet. We won't be able to see his feet here, but they'll probably show it here. This one may not be the right one because there's no one's talking. So you notice his head, right, is just smashing into the wheel and the steering wheel. The other thing we talked some about last time is the crunch. Which of these cars has a better crunch front? All right, watch his head here. This one, it's almost scary to watch this. Probably dead, right? What do you think? Even worse. You don't want that, do you? Pretty bad. Now they're doing which is the new test they talk about. They used these crash tests where they just ran it right into the wall. But now they're doing these off-center ones, which they say is much more common, especially if you're on a highway and someone comes into your lane. You're not going to just hit straight on, you hit an angle, and that causes quite a bit of different types of damage. And that's one of the reasons they started with the side airbag. You can also see his hands, how many broken bones there are. All right, now let's watch Tim. Which driver would you rather have been? It's pretty obvious, isn't it? Probably some pretty good injury, but he's going to survive. But here's the thing they're talking about, because with the side kind of hit, your head goes off of the airbag, it hits the side of the car, and that's the kind of thing they've been trying to correct with the side airbag. He didn't quite do that. All right, that's not the one I exactly want to do. So let me see if I can find it again, but with them talking. I should have watched it beforehand. I thought, oh, that's it. I recognize that. All right, this is probably it. Let's try this.
Explosion of metal.
There we go. All right, sorry. Well, that was the intro. Now we'll do it.
That's the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety's front crash of a 2009 Chevrolet Malibu and 1959 Chevrolet Bel Air. In slow motion, you can see the differences in how the new and classic cars perform in this version of the traditional frontal offset test. The Institute conducted this.
That's the frontal offset. That was the words I was trying to find. So, like when I was a kid, we would see these and they just went straight into the wall. And I don't know when they started doing these, someone discovered that, man, it makes a big difference.
Test to commemorate its 50th anniversary. It dramatically shows how much improvement has been made in passenger protection since the nonprofit organization opened its doors. The two cars collide in an explosion of metal, glass, and plastics. Where the Malibu crumple zone absorbs much of the crash forces ahead of the windshield, the Bel Air structure allows the lighter car to compress the passenger compartment. The impact is made worse for the Bel Air driver by the
Did you notice the dashboard? You don't want the dashboard in your lap or the engine in your lap.
lack of airbags, head restraint, and even a seatbelt. As a result, injuries to the neck, chest, and both legs would be likely. Consequently, the Bel Air receives a poor rating across the board. On the other hand, the modern Malibu provides good protection, with the dummy movement being well controlled. Measures indicate a low risk to most body regions, though a foot injury would be possible. Beyond the safety gear, advancements in vehicle engineering give the Malibu a clear advantage in this matchup. While classic cars are often considered to be rock solid, this 59 demonstrates how much better today's cars are. And the IHS has played a key role in driving these advancements. In the past 50 years, the Institute has made a real impact. The roads today are safer for it. For complete safety information, subscribe.
Yeah, so they may have a video of this of your own car as well. They obviously don't do these a lot because it's pretty expensive. I think the auto industry donates the cars, so I don't think it's their expense. And they obviously want it to do well. And the auto industry also is learning. So I mean, that's the kind of incredible thing is auto manufacturers are learning from the IIHS on how to build their cars safer. And obviously, if you get a low score, you're going to have to make some changes. Now I saw is this that itty bitty car? Is that called a smart car? Those things look like death traps to me. This right here, right? They look pretty dangerous. Let's just see. IAHS smart car safety. Let's see if we can actually do a search. I haven't tried this before. Modern overlap IA crash tests. Let's see how it does. Would you want to be in one of these cars? The one thing you first think is there's not much of a crash zone. I mean, a crunch zone at all. It actually doesn't look as bad as the Bel Air. It looks like it actually held up better than the Bel Air. It doesn't look as bad as it could be. There's a lot of protection for the driver.
Probably head injury to the window.
Yeah, the window's open. If the window hadn't been open, it's just hard to know what that would have been. But so, you know, I just tried that one just on the fly. So you might be able to put your car in there and do IAHS, and then they may be doing a car, you know, that's 15 years ago. So who knows how much safer it is today versus them. Look at all these videos they have, and that's just smart cars. And then my Shostakovich videos. All right. So that's auto insurance. I want to switch to commercial. So what happens with commercial? So let's do a little test and see if y'all can think of commercial. We just did auto insurance. So what happens when auto insurance goes to the commercial side? So this is, I don't know if any of y'all seen this one before. Anybody see this video? So we'll test your knowledge here. So here's a police officer who's obviously not negligent, and he rear ends this truck. And the guy has his daughter in there. No one's injured, but his truck is totaled. All right. So the police officer, that's commercial insurance. The police department buys insurance. So who should pay in this situation, would you think? The police officer, the police department, the city, the guy whose car was hit? Who should be responsible for this? The police department. It should come out of their insurance. So that's the question, right? Who's buying the insurance? The city or the police department? All right. Who do you think did pay for this? And could he sue? That's the other thing. Let's say they don't pay enough. Can he sue the police department? Can he sue the police department for negligence and get compensatory damages like pain and suffering?
The truck driver had? Is that what are you going to say the truck driver had to pay for damage?
No, that's the question I'm asking. So we got commercial now. Will his insurance pay anything? or should his insurance pay anything? The guy in the truck. He's just sitting there because you see there's a police car here. This police car here is coming up and he's going to lose control and hit this guy. The first question you're going to hear the police officer say is, why'd you pull over? Are you broken down? He says, no, I pulled over because your sirens, I did what I'm supposed to do. So, all right, well, let's see. Let's see how good you do on this.
In Cleveland, Ohio, the police officer was smashed into the back of that pickup truck.
You okay, sweetie? You okay?
The driver of the truck, traveling with his young daughter, also had dash cameras rolling.
Poor kid.
The child, while frightened, was not physically hurt. Her dad, driver Carl Hewitt, suffered bruises. Their truck was totaled.
Were you broken down?
No, I pulled over for you guys.
Okay.
So, the first thing you do is you try to blame the other person, right? That's a trick.
Well, I hit the snow and,
The 3 other cops.
yeah, no, I got
I
you.
thought you pulled around, so I pulled over here.
So you heard him, I hit the snow, right? And then the interesting thing is there were 2 police cars ahead of him who had no trouble with the snow. This is a guy who not only had trouble with the snow here, but you can see on his dash cam, he had trouble with the snow several times before. So who's at fault there? Is it the city? Is it the police department? Or is it this driver? Who's responsible? I mean, that's the other thing. Can this police officer be sued personally? Now, will his personal insurance cover it? What will his insurance company say? You're on the job. We're not going to cover you, right? So his isn't going to pay it. But could this guy sue the police officer? So usually, you think, well, he was on his job. You can't sue him personally, but you can kind of ask that question.
Nope. Sorry about that, man. I couldn't stop it. The snow hit the snow and I just,
Oh, I saw it, and we went, my face turned.
I'm glad you,
But he didn't get no ticket up the road.
you're not gonna get past me, no.
You mean the police officer or the guy in the truck?
Not the guy in the truck.
And no, he did have, no, they absolutely admit he did nothing wrong.
If someone was injured, would they have to?
Well, that's the other thing you might want to ask at the end of this. What if his daughter was seriously injured? Who would pay for her medical expenses? So that would be the liability part of, well, all of this would be liability, but there would be, the city or the police department was going to have to pay that.
A watchdog group called Cleveland Area Body Camera obtained the police video of this incident from February 2022. 3 police cruisers were headed to a highway crash. Early on, the third officer repeatedly ran into snowbed. He said,
So it was a highway crash. So it's not like they're chasing a criminal or something, right? So it wasn't, it's the urgency wasn't quite what you might
and
think.
fishtailed his vehicle.
What'd you just notice? 2 cars, no trouble. This guy shouldn't be doing this at all.
The 2 officers in front of him never lost control. Then, after the police pulled into the exit road, the third officer seemed to rev his engine and could not pull his cruiser back.
Pretty cool body dash cam, isn't it?
Okay, sweetie? You okay? All right, are you okay? Snow got me. All right, radio.
So he's caught on film several times admitting fault. Don't you agree? I mean, there's not much question here. Who's liable?
Yeah. Send Parmesan.
I don't know what that means.
Do me a favor, sir. Come over here. Stay by your car. No, it's gonna be a Dodge Ram 4x4, Juliet Alpha Kilo 1336. You gotta turn around. Do it. Here. You can sit in there. Go ahead and sit. Can you speak English?
Yes, I do.
Okay, all right. Well, you weren't answering me.
I know.
Were you broken down?
No, I pulled over for you guys.
Okay, well, I hit the snow and,
The 3 other cops.
yeah, no, I got
I
you.
thought you pulled around.
He's pretty smart. So the other guys don't have any problem. It's a good way to insult someone without doing it. I mean, it's like, hey, you're the only one that had a problem, man.
That's why I pulled over here.
Nope. Sorry about that, man.
Sorry about that, man. It's all Carl Hewitt is getting from police. A few days after this crash, an insurance company for the police department informed Hewitt that because the officers are part of a city agency and were responding to a call, the police and their insurance company are not responsible
Is that what you were thinking?
for any of the damages. Section 2744 Code of the Ohio Revised Code provides immunity.
So that's part of commercials as well, is there's laws. All right, so who's gonna pay for this guy's trucks? So the police aren't, the city is not. He's forbidden by law of collecting anything from the insurance company. So then the question might be, so I asked, would his insurance cover it? What could his insurance possibly cover it under? Would this be classified as uninsured motorists? You could probably have a case with them if he had the uninsured motorist coverage. His Part D would cover this, I would think. And that's kind of the question, and they don't cover this in here. So if I were he, I would call my insurance company, hey, the city's not covering this. I need to be covering my policy. I don't have uninsured motorist coverage, but I got Part D, you should cover it. Now, what would his insurance company say? No, it's the city's responsibility. Could his insurance company say, well, we don't care about the law, they should be covering you, and the fact they're not covering you, that's between you and them. So I don't know, because they don't tell us what kind of personal insurance he has, but there is another part of this
Two
that's
officers
interesting.
that cause an accident while driving and responding to emergency calls, as long as the officers are not involved in willful misconduct.
There's no willful misconduct there.
This police officer may have been driving too fast for the icy conditions, but that technically falls short of willful misconduct. The officer did call for an ambulance for the 2-year-old child.
Well, that's also interesting as well, because ambulances are not cheap. So who paid for the ambulance? So that would be interesting to know as well.
Radio Center Squad here, there was a child in the car, so everybody's okay, but please check her out.
So what do you think he did get from the police?
I'm sorry.
An apology, a letter? So essentially you're gonna see all they got was the police chief saying, well, at least no one was hurt. That was 100% of their compensation. He said, essentially saying he should be happy no one was hurt, because it could have been a lot worse. So that's what I would have done as well. The police officer, hey, GoFundMe. I don't know. People are so now today are so scared to do anything. Well, is that a bit guilt or whatever? But yeah, you think the police officers would have collected money. Who's going to pay for the police car?
The city.
The city, they'll pay for that, right? That won't be a question.
You okay, sweetie? I know, that was crazy, dude. I wasn't even going that fast. I came around the curve.
No, you weren't going fast, said Lewis. Still, the officer
That looks pretty
disagreed
fast.
and repeated his assertion about not going that fast to a fellow officer.
Even he said, he goes,
Yeah.
I wasn't going.
Okay, then.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah. I mean, my shoulders are killing me from bracing, but
You poor guy.
the next entrance. What?
Been left field or
Okay.
an owner who has been left field or and do what I needed to do, said Lewis. I pulled over and I was hit, and now I am responsible for all the financials. I'm just a blue collar guy. You know, thousands of dollars is a lot of money out of my pocket to buy a truck. I was proud of that truck. What if I didn't make it out of there? What if my daughter didn't get out there? The police are.
So yeah, he's lucky, he could have been gotten tens of thousands of dollars of medical bills too. Who's going to be responsible for that? Now, if he has health insurance, that should cover it. But again, how does the law work that they say the police aren't responsible? Does everybody else say, well, they are responsible, so we're not on the hook? That's
Not really. You caused the accident, be responsible for it. I don't care whether you are the law or not. You caused the accident.
y'all tired to see this scene. It's like the 6th time they've shown that, isn't it?
The police department chief is declining to talk about financial responsibility or liability in this case. He says it is up to the insurance carrier to handle any claims. But again, the insurance carrier is refusing to give the driver anything. As for the overall incident on February the 4th, the chief of police is calling it an unfortunate accident and says the entire department is relieved no one was physically injured.
Physically injured. Someone was injured though. So,
Still, financial injuries matter too. And if the police department and its insurance carrier had even an ounce of integrity or shame, they would be doing everything they could to help Mr. Billowitz raise money for a new truck. The police could start a GoFundMe truck.
yeah, so when we get the commercial side,
So
there's,
nothing happened. The guy just did.
well, I don't know where he is today, but yeah, as of that point, yeah, he was completely out of a truck. And so pretty frustrating, but when you get to the commercial side, you've got a lot of extra factors going on. So who actually owns the insurance policy? Does the city own it? Does the police department own it? Who's liable? Who was negligent? So negligence, we're gonna have to talk a lot about that.
So I know you said you didn't know what type of insurance he had. So could you tell us basically how it would work if he had Part B and then if
Yeah.
he didn't have typically?
This Ohio is so strange. So when they have a law like that, you have to look at the specific definition of an uninsured motorist. I'm not sure if technically the police would be considered an uninsured motorist. I mean, technically they're insured,
Right.
but they're not insured for this. So, it's strange. So I don't know. He could have been out of luck. It's possible he had insurance, but didn't have Part D. Maybe he only had the liability side, which that's not gonna help him at all, right? He had
I
no
doubt it.
liability here. If he had the uninsured, possibly this would cover it. If he had the medical, that would have covered that, but hopefully he has health insurance. So I don't know. Those are the details that are really, really interesting in this case. They just don't provide them here. So it's hard to say. I don't think Texas has a law like that. You would certainly hope not. You would certainly hope the police department would cover their own risks. Now, police, one of the most dangerous things they do is drive fast, and that's how a lot of injuries. So there's a lot of it. So it's a high number. So maybe that's the reason insurance companies don't like insuring them, but that's kind of the reason they should be insuring them, because that's where they cause the most damage. But all right, so you're gonna notice we're gonna get much more involved on the liability side here than on the physical damage side. On the personal side, the liability is there, but most people don't think much about it. They're mainly concerned about their property. On the corporate side or the entity side, there's gonna be a lot more discussion about the liability. So, and I don't know if, maybe I should research this guy's name and see if there's anything later. He probably could have done his own GoFundMe and raised far more money than that. So I've always asked students about business law, and I'm kind of shocked that it sounds like y'all don't have business law the way I did when I was undergraduate. So we had to do 6 hours of business law. And do y'all do 6 hours still, or 3 hours, or 0 hours?
Zero.
Yeah, you're really missing out. This is actually really pretty critically important stuff. I got a lot out of mine. They were easy classes, and they were kind of fun because you went through all these case law and who's suing whom and all this kind of stuff. But there's several parts of it for finance majors that, you could probably research yourself, but the UCC code, very, very important stuff. If someone fraudulently, counterfeits one of your checks, who's responsible for that? You or the bank? Your credit card is stolen, someone uses that, who's responsible for that? The UCC tells you, always say UCC code, so I guess the UC code. It tells you who's liable for what. It tells you a lot about banking. I never use checks anymore because every time you mail a check, they got all the information they need for you to counterfeit your check. So actually digital is safer. But not only that, the rules are different between online transactions and checks. When you write a check versus online, the rules are different. So that tells you all of that. But the UCC also tells you a lot about who's responsible for what in certain situations. So that's pretty important. But the other area that's really, really important is, to our class, is this whole area of negligence. So a tort is a wrong that you've done that's not related to contract. You don't have a contract. So contract law is very different. That's the other thing business law tells you. Contract law, So y'all don't have any of that, right? You don't know the 4 things you need for a valley contract. Y'all never studied that? Oh man, that's so critical. I was shocked at USAA when I started having needing contracts. I thought I was going to go to the lawyer and say, hey, I need this contract, but I go to the lawyer and says, yeah, well, you write everything you need and I'll add in the boilerplate. He's like, you want me to write a contract? Yeah, you write the contract. And I was like, I shouldn't be writing contracts. But he said, well, just write what you want. So, okay, fine. So yeah, you know, for a contract to be valid, you have to have consideration, you have to have meeting of the minds, you have to have legal capacity, it's got to be in the right form. Those are all really critically important. So anyway, but negligence in court is really what we're after. Negligence is you're responsible and you cause some harm that's not related to contract law. That's what we're looking for here. That's the whole liability side. If you want to learn it, you can take your own class. I actually went through this class because I was worried because I hadn't had business law in 30 years. And I was really happy taking this class that nothing really has changed. It's like, yeah, I studied that. So it's not like law has radically changed. So this is pretty good. I don't know how much it costs. Sometimes the great courses, their classes can be 30, 40 bucks, kind of overpriced. Here you can try it for $0. That sounds pretty good. So there are ways, if you haven't had business law, there are ways you can teach yourself. And this one actually did a pretty good job of going through it. But you notice this one's specifically related to negligence and torts. So it's not covering the UCC, it's not covering contract law. So I don't know why business law went out of vogue in colleges. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to walk through commercial insurance, the different types of products. What you're going to find is most people buying commercial side are going to use a broker that's going to put all these products together, because you might buy one from this company, one from this company, and no one has the time to mess with all of that. So you get this package policy that has all these different policies. They're actually different policies with different companies, but your broker brings them together and does all the work, legwork for you. So let's start with the simplest, which is just commercial property. Commercial property is a lot like homeowners, except for on the commercial side. It has the same kind of basic and broad form. It covers buildings and personal property. Covers is separated in 3 categories: buildings, personal property, and then you have property of others, people that are on the insured location. Doesn't cover very similar things that we saw with homeowners. Doesn't cover land, water, bridges. Money and securities, obviously, companies be able to manage that, put stuff in the bank, put things in vaults. It doesn't cover vehicles because auto is going to cover that. You can't do things that are illegal. So if someone's got a stash of illegal drugs or something and that gets stolen, that's not going to be covered. And other coverages are very similar. So very, very similar to homeowners insurance. Exclusions are very similar to homeowners. Pollution, we're going to talk about pollution a little bit more probably when we get into the liability side, but pollution is a special case. Pollution was a huge issue for USAA because USAA and Lock and Terror are over the aquifer. And boy, you can do a lot of damage if you don't manage, the oil coming off your cars and those kind of things. So you'll notice if you go to Lock and Terror, they have a lot of things to protect all the stuff that's just coming off of cars. All right, so there's really not a big difference. If you were to buy commercial insurance, you're really not going to find a huge difference. Now, one thing you notice that's not in here is something like inventory. So we're going to see that theft is a completely separate thing, because you have a Walmart to have all this inventory. That's a very, very different thing. So here we're really talking about the stuff that's owned by the business that they're not selling as a product. Business income is a very unique coverage. You might think of this as like disability income, like if you got injured or something, but business income, you've had a covered loss and you're losing business because of that. It covers reduction in your income because of a covered loss. So let's say you have a hurricane that destroyed your building, you can't sell anything, it's going to cover your revenue. and any increased expenses that you have. And they just want to know what was your income before the loss and what was it after, and we're going to make up that difference. You got property damage. You got, well, how far down can it go and up? It kind of depends on your business, but something happens to your supplier, to a buyer, a manufacturer, you're trying to figure out where's your loss originating. The timing of loss, how long is it covered? So the issue here is how they define your coverage. Is it over a time period, or is it just a dollar amount? So usually they're going to cover you over a time period that you get back to normal operations. But some people have switched to a value policy where they say, if this event happens, we're just going to pay this much money. Kind of like life insurance, just to keep it simple, because coming up with how much you're due is pretty tough. Because what if you have a covered loss right before a major recession? You say, hey, our revenue dropped 60%, or what before COVID? Our revenue dropped 70%, but yeah, that's COVID. That's not a covered event. Yeah, but we also had a fire. Okay, the fire is covered, but we know you lost. If you're a movie theater, you're almost hoping for a fire right before COVID, right? That you'd hope you get this covering you. So can you convert something that's not covered and make it covered just because you coincidentally had a fire or a covered event at that time? So that's business income. I'm not going to go through the details. You can kind of read through them, but it's an important policy. I was working with a private school, and we had this business income coverage. And so we walked them through the scenarios, and they're like, oh, well, if we have a major fire or something, we'll just move our school across the street. And I'm not that type of risk manager. I'm like, well, have you ever talked to the people across the street? Are you sure you can use their buildings? Will they qualify, or with the regulators let you do that? No, we never talked to them. Why don't you call them and just ask, if our school went down, could we use your property? And they said, well, it's not a problem because their buildings are empty. Well, 6 months later, they were all leased out. So, that's not an issue. We have a school across the street from us. If something happens to them, could we let them use our facilities? We use theirs. So we actually did call that school, and we became each other's backup plan. Any kind of, shooter event or any kind of fire, anything, all their kids would come to our school, and the other way we go there. We just worked it out. So with business income, that's one where I like to sit down with the business and go through the scenario. What if you're doing a school? What if you can't use this building anymore? What's our backup plan? If it happens in May, no big deal. You're in the school year early. If it happens in August, big deal. You've got contracts with teachers. So walk through the scenario, exactly what you're going to do. And they say, well, just going to move across the street. And then you start saying, well, let's go see if that's possible. How big are those buildings? What do they have? Can you actually do everything you need there? This is where that broker is really, really helpful. I did this with the school and some other entities. You just sit down with the broker and say, what if this happened? What if this happened? What does the insurance do? What do we have to prove? Go through those scenarios. This is a very specialized insurance, boiler and machinery. And it's so specialized. There are very few people who actually write it, because you have to have actuaries that's about all they do, because they have to understand this particular business. It's very unique in that it does cover more than what normal insurance does, but it covers losses related to sudden and accidental breakdown of commercial boiler and machinery. What exactly are these? There's a list down here. Steam boilers, I'm not exactly sure what that is. Air tanks, I kind of know what that is. I don't know the difference between air tank and a compressor. I had no idea what a devulcanizer is. I'd love to own one though. Furnaces, kettles, mangle rolls, I'm not sure exactly what that is. Refrigerating systems, steam pipelines. So I was thinking with the school I was working with is, well, we don't need that. We don't have any of that. And then I looked, and we had that in our policy. So now I'm curious, what are you covering? So we do have refrigerators. Are you just talking about the refrigerator we have in the kitchen? Is that what you're covering? That seems like that wouldn't cover. So we were covered, but I didn't know what we were actually covering. But that's what boiler machinery is. It's those type of specialized equipment that are, when they break down, they cause a lot of damage. It excludes coverage for boiler explosion, mechanical, electrical breakdowns. Boiler machinery risk have some unique characteristics, so they have a separate policy. They're covering things that are subject to heat, pressure, electrical energy, centrifugal force. You can have operator error. So here's one area we talked about this on exam 1. Why do companies buy insurance when CAPM says no? And this is one area where the insurance industry really adds quite a bit of value. Like with me at the school, it's like, why are we getting boiler and machinery? Well, they can walk in and say, well, that right there, that if that thing blows up, it's going to cause a lot of damage. Who's operating that? What's their training? We're not going to insure you for that until you get the right training, or you get this thing on the wall, whatever. So they come in and actually do quite a bit of value. And to me, at a school, I don't want something blowing up and causing damage. So I want to hear what they're saying about that equipment. There's a moral hazard here where they want you to take care of the equipment in a really good way, and the insurance company forces you to do that. We'll talk about that down here. The cost of repairing is covered. There's no deduction for depreciation or obsolescence, so it gives you more coverage than typical policies. It can cover other damages like spoiled food. And this is a loss controlled focused product where the insurance company is trying to help you reduce your frequency and severity by telling you what to do that's better. And they have some power over this. They have what's called a suspension provision. If they walk in and notice you're doing stuff that's not correct, they can say your insurance is canceled until you fix this. So not only do they encourage you with lower premiums, they also encourage you by canceling your insurance. And a lot of people they're talking to may not have any idea that they're doing something that's dangerous. So you actuaries, how specialized do you want to get? I don't know who these top writers are. Probably be an AIG type of firm, maybe a Chubb. Probably do this kind of stuff. We'll look when we do the annual report or the statutory blanks. We'll see if boiling machinery has its own column or not, because I'm not really sure about that. But yeah, that specialization could certainly help. I don't see that as a policy that would necessarily disappear with technology or anything. You think we'd still need these things 50 years from now. The advantage of specializing is you're always employed, and you know they have to keep you because they can't replace you, right? It's hard to find an actuary who knows just that. The bad side is 10 years later, if you really hate it, you're not going to jump over to the auto side because you're not going to know much. So, all right, commercial crime. Here we talked about the theft side. Theft is a very specialized area. So policy may require insured to have certain protective devices like alarms and bars. Have y'all probably seen the news programs about theft going on in certain areas? It's kind of scary, these groups that show up and just kind of demolish. I don't think it happens very often, but the news keeps showing it. Kind of scary. If I were working, what would you do if you're a worker at a place like that? You're just going to let them come in, right? You're not going to risk your body to try to save somebody else's property. But what are they requiring companies to have in those places if that's a risk? I don't know if you can really, alarms and bars are going to protect you from those people. I've seen videos where people take a pickup truck and just run into the ATM as hard as they can and try to knock it over and break it and all those, there may not be anything that can protect you from that. You have dishonest act of employees. That's not going to be covered by commercial property. You can define who's covered. The interesting thing is the employee must be trying to do it to benefit themselves. If they're just vandalizing because they hate the employer, that wouldn't be covered. Kind of reminds me of Societal General, where they had an employee that caused them to lose a lot of money just because he's mad at them. He had no benefit from it at all. And then inventories, you can't say, hey, we did our inventory, we're missing $5,000 of stuff. That's not theft. All right, you can't do that. I don't know if they even do inventories anymore. Have y'all ever done an inventory? Have you really? What kind of company was that?
Instruments, basically having to take into inventory of how many instruments we have.
Instruments like musical instruments, or
musical instruments.
Oh, really? Oh, that's cool. Oh, you would hope there'd be none missing, wouldn't you?
Yes.
That's especially French horns at $30,000. Yeah, I've done an inventory a couple of times. It's a really boring thing to, that would be pretty fun, but yeah, the inventory I do is pretty boring, especially if you've got a Walmart, you just got 40,000 things in there, counting all this stuff. It's really tough to do. So one dishonesty, once the dishonesty is discovered, you can't say, well, we're covered and let them keep stealing stuff. You've got to shut them down right when you find it. Forgery is a big issue. Faking a signature on a check, alteration, changing $100 to $2,100, that can be covered. Extortion, these are the rules here are pretty interesting. So ransom, first of all, it's covered, but it has to be bodily injury. If they just threaten property damage, that's not covered. You have to report it to the authorities. Boy, I've seen some really horrible stories. There's one on I shouldn't tell you these. It was just so sad, but yeah, this banker is just missing. They don't know where he is. And someone went to his house, took him with a gun to the bank, forced him to let them rob the bank, and then this is the horrible. I shouldn't tell you, but they tied him up in a chair and then threw the chair into the lake and just drowned this guy. Such horrible people. And they caught him and found it out. It's like, man, it was just horrible people. But yeah, I mean, their first thought was this banker has stolen from us, and they were trying to track him down, thinking he ran out of the city. This poor guy who's just suffered this horrible death, and they're bad mouthing him. So yeah, I mean, this is one reason I don't travel to some countries. It can be pretty dangerous. I don't know how this works on the personal side. If you have a family member that's kidnapped, I don't know how your homeowners would cover that. I've never seen. Is it a separate coverage, really? But you can buy it? Or I don't think USA does. I've never heard anything like that. They'd probably be wondering why you're buying it. I guess someone that's really wealthy.
Mexico?
Well, if you travel to Mexico, yeah, certain areas, certain places, yeah, you'd probably be kind of scared. I love Big Bend National Park, but they were having some kidnapping issues there, and it's like, yeah, I'm not risking that.
Which part?
Big Bend.
Here in Texas?
Yeah. There's places where you can see the frontier, and you're out there completely by yourself.
Yeah, we were there.
So yeah, I mean, I would go out there with my bike and all but completely by myself, and now I'm thinking, no, that's not too smart. Computer fraud, that can be covered. This is the cybersecurity. Obviously, that's a big deal for insurers. So that, there's going to be some limits to that. And then theft of money and securities. Obviously, there's going to be some limits there because they don't want companies having $20,000 sitting in the building. So there's going to be rules that you're going to follow there, just to make sure, my subway says, I think they don't accept $50 bills. There's more and more entities saying they don't accept cash at all, which is kind of interesting, but it makes sense from their business standpoint. Cash is a really messy thing to have to deal with. So yeah, this is special commercial crime. Not everybody's going to have that. The school I worked with, that's not part of what they were looking at. But in an inland marine, this is stuff is being shipped to you. To me, the word inland marine sounds strange because marine, I'm thinking water, but it includes trucking, air, by ship, boat. If you read the history of risk, Peter Bernstein's book, he said that getting the Arabic numbers and getting away from the Roman numerals, can you imagine taking this class with Roman numerals? Be kind of a tough class. But that opened up a lot of statistics that we had before. And with statistics, you can now calculate the risk of an ocean selling with cargo. And so what they did is open up insurance. And once you open up insurance, you open up trade around the world. So actually getting that numbering system opened up the first insurance, ocean marine. And then obviously you start insuring other things. So it's essentially cargo insurance, covers shipments. The question you might have is who's liable? Is it the person who sold it or the person who bought it? At what point does the liability shift to you? And then if you bought something from I don't know, some business and UPS delivers it, comes to your door, and then someone steals it at your door, at what point does title pass to you? At what point is UPS responsible? At what point is the person who sold it to you? That's the kind of question you have to ask with this type of insurance. And there are no standard policies because we're doing all kinds of stuff. It's essentially an all risk coverage. So generally who owns the cargo has exposure, but there can be questions. You might think that UPS is responsible while they're transporting it, and that may be true, but they may not have the coverage you want, or may not fully cover what you need. Terms of the sale can somewhat define it: free on board or origination, or free on board destination tells you when does title pass related to that transporter, UPS. So does the seller transfer it to the buyer when they hand it to UPS, or does it transfer to the buyer when UPS hands it to the seller? And obviously now with packages getting stolen at people's doors, at what point, I'm amazed FedEx, UPS, they don't try very hard to hide stuff. They just stick it right out there. Fortunately, I have a neighbor who's like, she's like watching all the time. And if anything gets delivered to my house, she takes it inside her house and emails me, like, you got a UPS package? It's like, she doesn't have to do that for me, but it's like, so I got better security than anybody else. But who's responsible? And you never really know. I bought, speaking of music, I bought all the Mahler symphonies. So a bunch of symphonies, and UPS person put it right under my, my drainage, and it rained and they all got ruined. So I called the company and they forced UPS to send me a new set. They weren't ruined as far as they were still usable, they were just wrinkled. So I ended up with 2 sets of Mahler symphonies. And so I play out of the wrinkled one, and the good set I keep kind of off to the side. But they covered everything, but I wasn't really sure. Okay, who's responsible for this? I thought it was UPS. They should have seen it was going to rain, and why would you put it right there? Carriers do have certain things that aren't covered. And so that may be something you're worried about, that an insurance policy would cover you. So you can buy a policy that covers you for the entire year. You can buy a policy that covers you just for a particular shipment. So you buy at the point in time where you do the shipment, and then you can buy insurance from the UPS as well. I don't know if y'all have ever done that before. I bought a policy once from FedEx. I purchased this really, really nice painting for some friends, and they're moving. They're like, Ron, we're not taking that with us. And I go, I'll ship it to you. No big deal. So I take it to FedEx. That poor lady, she spent her entire afternoon wrapping that thing. But the insurance was almost as expensive as what I paid for the painting. So I kind of doubled up. And then I was worried when they got it, they would never open it, because she put like 10 rolls of duct tape around that thing. It's like, you better have a good knife, because it was going to be tough to open. But it got to them undamaged, so it worked. With UPS, I don't know if y'all ever insured with UPS, US Postal Service. I wish I had my phone once, because this guy was buying insurance for something very fragile. He even put the word fragile on the box. And so he bought the insurance, and I kid you not, the postal worker picked the box up and threw it into the crate behind them. And the guy was like, about to pass out. I just told you this was very fragile. So that was crazy. But anyway, so Postal Service will ask you how much it is, they essentially want to know what they're covering. So it's kind of a valued policy where you're setting up the value up front. I don't know the rules on this one. USA doesn't sell commercial. I don't know if you have something that's worth $5 and you tell you the Postal Service is worth $500, and you're hoping it gets destroyed on the way or whatever. I don't know what the rules are on that. Has anyone ever filed a claim with the Postal Service on a policy you bought? It'd be interesting to see that policy and who's actually insuring them. Is it the government's insuring, or do they actually have a separate policy with somebody else? No telling. Have any of y'all had a package stolen before?
Oh, yeah.
Did you get it replaced pretty easily?
It wasn't my package, it was my brother's, because like at my neighborhood, it's like, when they have all the mailboxes together
Yeah.
and like a little cover thing, they broke into all of them.
Oh.
So everybody lost everything.
Yeah.
The companies ended up giving us some, and I don't know what other people got. My brother, he just lost dinosaurs, so it wasn't that important. He's 24, so it's not like, you know.
Yeah, and you have to just, first of all, you don't know what you lost. So
Yeah.
we had our mailboxes broke into, so they got all my junk mail. It's like, good, I don't have to throw all that away. But you know, who's responsible? The postal service, or, you know, you have all those debates. So yeah, it's, there can be confusion. I've never lost anything with any, I've never had a package stolen before. They delivered a PC, a personal computer, back when those things cost, you know, several $100s, with the name of the PC company on the box, and put it right on my doorstep for everybody to see. And I was like, wow, that was easy to steal. And then someone mailed me some music, and I had to go sign for it at the postal service. And I was like, this makes no sense. This music was like $20, and I got this several $100 PC. So I don't understand their logic at all. I don't know who decides I have to sign for stuff. I didn't ask for it. So, you know, something to think about anytime you have to ship stuff is, you know, is it worth the insurance? How much the insurance? So like me with that painting, it was incredibly expensive, but I said, I'll just do it. All right, so here's where we're going to spend a lot of our time, is on commercial liability, including professional liability. We're going to include that part under it. All right, so what do you know about tort? So tort is not criminal. You can't buy insurance for criminal activity. Tort is not contract. Doesn't apply. But one thing to always remember, one of the most important reasons for a contract is to shift liability. And you should read it in those terms. So have y'all read your apartment leases? Have you, Alvaro, you did? You every all the way through it? Did you notice how much risk they're shifting to you? I mean, it's a big part of that policy. I read mine, and I rewrote the entire thing and sent it back to them. They rejected it, but they had stuff in there where it's like, there's no way I'm agreeing to that. They had stuff that said, if my main neighbor does damage to my apartment, I'm responsible for that. It's like, I'm not going to pay for it. If they break my windows, you can pay for an apartment complex and you can sue her. But at that time, it was a woman that was next door. I didn't think she was going to do any damage, but it's like, I'm not going to be responsible for the damage she calls. If she leaves a pot on the oven and it burns the place thing off, I'm not paying for that kind of stuff.